Many of the individuals currently residing at BSDC have formal behavior support programs. These types of programs are referred to as behavior support plans, or BSPs. Other individuals at BSDC have programs that are referred to as behavior support guidelines, or BSGs. BSGs will be discussed in a different training presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of BSPs. This training will be presented in 2 parts, and there will be a quiz after each part. Let's get started now with Part 1. During the first part of this training, we will provide a brief overview of the purpose of BSPs. We will walk through the way a BSP is formatted and the type of information you will find in a BSP. In Part 2, we will walk through the way we document behaviors that are tracked with a BSP. We will use a hypothetical example BSP in order to illustrate these different points. There will be a lot of information presented in this training, and you won't learn how to follow every BSP that you might encounter once you start working with the individuals in the area to which you've been assigned. However, we hope that this training will give you a ground floor understanding of BSPs so that when you start working with the individuals and receive training on each person's individual BSP, you will be better prepared to learn those details. The purpose of the BSP is to provide guidance to staff in responding to target behaviors for individuals for whom the interdisciplinary team, or IDT, agrees meet most or all of the following criteria. For behaviors that have been identified as problematic or target behaviors, we generally see that there are multiple target behaviors, which generally occur frequently during most reporting periods. These behaviors tend to be sufficiently intense that they may cause damage or injury to the individual, others, and/or property, and target behaviors may also reduce an individual's access to the community or may cause stigma. Psychotropic medications may be prescribed, and these medications are prescribed, at least in part, to manage behavior. In addition, psychotropic medications may require frequent increases or decreases in dosage, or may be added, changed, or discontinued on a frequent basis. BSPs also involve replacement behaviors. Replacement behaviors serve the same function or purpose as the target behaviors. Replacement behaviors are an integral part of the BSP. Sometimes replacement behaviors are behaviors that an individual is already able to do, but he or she doesn't always do them. Other times a BSP may be designed to help teach new behaviors that match the function of the target behaviors. Frequently, both types of replacement behaviors may be contained in a BSP. If an individual has a safety plan or a mental health behavioral crisis intervention plan, or MHBCIP, that includes restrictive procedures, he or she will have a BSP as well. In addition, more frequent data collection is necessary to provide for an adequate level of analysis. Please note, not every individual who is supported with a BSP will meet every one of these criteria. As always, the needs of each individual will guide the decision of which type of behavioral support is appropriate. Now let's look at the format of BSPs. The first important thing to know that for most individuals at BSDC, the BSP document and the collection of data are in a hard copy or pencil and paper format. Many other individual habilitation programs and other programs for which you will be providing documentation will be run in Therap, which is an electronic system. A few of the BSPs at BSDC are run through Therap. If you are assigned to work with one of the individuals whose BSP is run through Therap, you will receive separate training on those BSPs as part of your individual in-servicing. Except for the few BSPs that are run through Therap, the BSP document and the data sheet for documentation are kept in each individual's Daily Documentation Book, or DDB. The BSP document itself is divided into several sections, including mental health diagnoses, medical diagnoses that might impact behavior, preferences including foods, items, or activities that an individual prefers or enjoys, definitions of precursors, target behaviors, replacement behaviors, and the like, specific techniques designed to prevent or reduce the likelihood that problem behaviors will occur, ways to support desirable behaviors when they occur, how to teach the individual to engage in desirable or replacement behaviors, ways of responding to precursors, ways of responding to target behaviors, any other interventions that might be in place for a particular individual that haven't been covered in other sections of the BSP, and the types of reinforcements or rewards that an individual might be able to earn when certain benchmarks are met. We'll discuss each of these sections in further detail in the next slides. Always remember, each individual is a unique person with individual needs, wants, desires, hopes, and dreams. Because each individual is unique, every BSP is unique. While there might be similarities between different BSPs, remember that every BSP is designed and written to provide the best supports for one specific individual. It's important to remember that a BSP is a teaching tool. As we said earlier, the purpose of the BSP is to provide guidance to staff in responding to target behaviors and in teaching or reinforcing appropriate behaviors. Your role in following and implementing a BSP is in part to help an individual learn more appropriate ways to achieve his or her needs, wants, desires, hopes, and dreams. It's just as important to remember that a BSP is neither a magic wand nor a weapon. That is, even the best BSP in the world will not suddenly make undesirable behavior go away. Learning takes time and patience. A BSP is also not developed in order to punish an individual or to threaten him or her. Keep these ideas in mind as you continue to learn about and implement BSPs for the individuals with whom you are working. Now let's walk through the BSP document itself. Here is a blank template of a BSP. You'll notice that it is formally titled Behavior Support Plan Procedure and Competency. That's the long name. You might hear it referred to as a PNC, but usually it's simply referred to as the BSP. So we'll continue to use that term as we talk about it. We'll be taking a look at a sample BSP, in this case written for an individual named Betty Boop, who was born 8/9 of 1930 and who lives at 3000 Lincoln Street. In the next slides, we'll walk through the different sections that might be contained in a BSP. Remember that because every BSP is written specifically for a particular individual, not every section we discuss today will be contained in every BSP. However, you will probably find most of these sections in any BSP you use. The first few sections will give you information about the individual. In this area, you'll find diagnostic information, a list of some of the individual's preferred items and activities, and definitions of any psychiatric indicators, precursors, and target and replacement behaviors. The first section is called Special Considerations. This section contains a listing of any psychiatric diagnoses and any medical or health information that might impact the individual's behavior or that might impact the way we interact with an individual. In our example, Betty Boop has been diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. Betty also has a diagnosed vision impairment with blindness in the left eye, and she also receives her nutrition and hydration enterally via a gastrostomy tube or G-tube. The next section provides a list of an individual's preferences. In our example, we have not listed preferred food or snacks since Betty receives all of her nutrition and hydration enterally. However, she has a number of preferred items and activities that she enjoys. She also has a number of definite dislikes. And as we'll see later on, knowing and respecting Betty's likes and dislikes helps to set her and us up for increased success. The next section is entitled Definitions. If an individual has a psychiatric diagnosis, you will frequently see psychiatric indicators defined here. Sometimes you may see this section called mental health indicators. This means the same thing, and what you'll see listed here defines signs and symptoms associated with the psychiatric diagnoses. Please remember that these psychiatric or mental health indicators are specific to an individual. The definitions you see here that apply to Betty Boop may be totally different than the mental health indicators we would see, for example, with Blondie Bumstead, even though both ladies might have a diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder. Setting events are things that increase the likelihood that a target behavior will occur. Many times setting events might reflect the types of things we saw in the likes and dislikes section or in the psychiatric indicators section. Think about setting events that might affect your behavior. For example, when you're extremely tired or if you have a headache, are you more likely to snap at a family member or friend? Or when you're late leaving for work, are you more likely to speed or drive less cautiously? The same idea applies to Betty. Precursors are less severe behaviors that tend to occur shortly before the more severe target behaviors. For example, before Betty engages in physical aggression, she may clench her fists tightly. Think of precursors as an early warning sign. Noticing when precursor behavior is occurring is important. In some cases, we can intervene at the precursor stage and reduce the likelihood that a target behavior will occur. Target behaviors are the problem behaviors that the client's IDT has selected to address in the behavior support plan. An individual may have other problematic behaviors. However, the BSP will focus on reducing the most severe behaviors first. This section will provide operational definitions of the target behaviors so that every staff member is on the same page. For example, in Betty's BSP, physical aggression is specifically defined as hitting or kicking others, biting, scratching, pushing, grabbing, or slapping others, or pulling others' hair. In Betty's case, this includes all attempts. For example, if Betty attempts to kick someone else but does not make contact, it will still be recorded as physical aggression. Sometimes attempts will not be included in the BSP, so again remember that each BSP is written for a specific individual. Replacement behaviors are the appropriate behaviors that we are trying to teach the individual to engage in instead of using problem behaviors or target behaviors to try to get what he or she wants. For example, Betty's replacement behavior is called appropriate request for escape, and that is defined as statements made without problem behavior to ask for a break from the task or activity or to leave the environment. The next section on the BSP describes some ways to prevent target behaviors from occurring. This section will also outline specific reinforcement that has been added to the BSP to encourage appropriate behaviors, as well as detailing specific ways to teach appropriate or replacement behaviors. Some of the strategies you'll see in this section may be familiar to you from the antecedent interventions and positive behavior supports training you have already received. The first part of this section is called Preventing Problem Behaviors. This involves staff using specific strategies, generally referred to as antecedent interventions, that helps the individual to refrain from engaging in target behaviors. Although not every intervention will always be successful every time, there are many different antecedent interventions that can be effective in many situations. Each staff office, and perhaps each homeroom, should have a copy of a document called Interventions to Prevent Problem Behaviors. This document is a list of general antecedent interventions that can apply to many individuals and many situations. If you cannot locate this document, please ask that one be made available to you. We won't review this document during this training, but it is a good reference to be aware of and to refer to regularly. In addition to the suggestions on this general document, you will also find information on the BSP itself that lists specific things that you can do to prevent problem behaviors for that particular individual. For example, remember that Betty does not like unfamiliar staff. Therefore, in our example BSP, we have included specific information for how familiar staff and new unfamiliar staff can interact together with Betty to help her to get to know and be comfortable with new staff. Also, remember that Betty does not like to have other people in her personal space. To reduce the likelihood that Betty will engage in physical aggression in an attempt to get someone away from her, which might harm that other person, by simply remembering to provide adequate space between Betty and other individuals helps to keep others safe while at the same time avoiding a situation where Betty might choose to hit someone. In this section, we'll also find strategies to reinforce appropriate or replacement behavior when it does occur. In Betty's case, remember that the replacement behavior is appropriate requests for escape. Therefore, when she asks for a break appropriately, she should be given a short break immediately, if that is appropriate to the situation. If there is some reason she cannot be given a break at that exact moment, explain to her why you cannot honor her request at that time, and offer her alternatives until such time as you can honor her original request. Frequently, reinforcement is also delivered in the form of verbal praise. Verbal praise should always be clear and specific about the behavior that you're praising. For example, if Betty appropriately asks for a break, a clear, specific form of praise might be something like, "Betty, thank you for asking to take a break so politely. You did a great job using your words." Now, using specific praise sounds like a lot of work sometimes, but think of it this way. If Betty happened to be scratching her nose when she asks for a break, and you only say, "Good job, Betty," she won't know whether she did a good job of asking for a break or a good job of scratching her nose, or maybe both. Clear and specific praise helps to teach the replacement behavior more efficiently. The next section provides strategies to help you respond appropriately to mental health indicators if the individual has a psychiatric diagnosis and to precursor behaviors. You may remember that Betty carries a diagnosis of bipolar I disorder. Her most concerning psychiatric indicator involves possible hallucinations, which frequently take the form of her talking to someone who isn't there. In these instances, you will use conversation to help her back to the here and now. For example, you could say something like, "Betty, what would you like to do tonight? Let's talk about our plans for the evening." Other responses to other psychiatric indicators will be listed in this section if applicable to the individual. This section may also contain strategies to help you respond when the individual is exhibiting precursor behaviors. Now remember that precursors are less severe behaviors that tend to occur shortly before the more severe target behavior. One of the precursor behaviors that Betty might display before she engages in physical aggression is to clench her fists. And remember that the replacement behavior we are trying to encourage is for Betty to ask for a break. Therefore, we will prompt Betty to ask for a break when we see her start to clench her fists. If there is a specific procedure to be followed in responding to precursors, it will be outlined here. So in this example, if Betty is displaying precursors, Betty should be prompted to ask for a break, and then she should be given a break for 2 minutes, and she can request up to 3 breaks. Sometimes, by using antecedent interventions or responding effectively to mental health indicators or precursors, we can prevent target behaviors from occurring. However, sometimes, despite our best efforts, target behaviors may still occur. The next section of the BSP describes ways to respond when target behaviors do occur. Notice that sometimes different target behaviors may have the same intervention or way of responding. At other times, different target behaviors may require different interventions. In our example, you'll see that we respond to Betty's 3 target behaviors in the same way. The last section you'll see on the BSP covers other interventions and reinforcement programs. Like other parts of the BSP, the reinforcements here are highly specific to each individual. Also, like other parts of the BSP, this section can be quite detailed and complex, depending upon the needs of the individual for whom it was developed. Sometimes these programs involve the individual being able to earn things like preferred activities or some amount of money. In Betty's case, she can earn $1 for every day that she follows her daily routine. The specific things that make up her routine are listed here, and you'll notice that this also involves not having any target behaviors all day. Betty also has the opportunity to earn extra money and an activity for going 7 days in a row with no target behaviors. During Part 1, we've reviewed the purpose and format of BSPs, and we've looked at the information contained in a BSP. We've also presented the most important ideas to keep in mind as you learn more about and begin to use BSPs with the individuals with whom you will be working. This concludes Part 1 of the BSP training. Please complete the quiz for Part 1, and then we'll start on Part 2, which will cover documentation for BSPs.